Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on our journey, our discussion through the works directed by the great Japanese filmmaker whose name is Takashi Kitano, also known as Beat Takeshi. Now I'd like to focus our attention, if I may, on that film which was released in 2007 in Japan, and the title is, in Japanese, Kantoku Banzai, or in English, Glory to the Filmmaker. Wow, what a fascinating film this is. If I were to try to describe what this film is about, I would say perhaps its essence is a focus on Takeshi Kitano, or Beat Takeshi, the filmmaker, and a very funny and episodic and almost sketch comedy-like depiction of what the pressures are of the creative filmmaker artist that is Beat Takeshi. The kinds of expectations that we understand are likely placed upon him as an artist that is very much in the public eye in Japan. He is perhaps well known for his gangster or yakuza films. He also found great success with his film Zatoichi. But he also is a filmmaker who is concerned with other types of stories, other types of ways of telling story. And perhaps this film is an artistic depiction of the push and pull, the struggle of the creative spirit in trying to comply with critics and the public, or trying to go with or go against expectation. Because after all, perhaps there are some films by him that are more popular critically and popularly than others. And so that, I think, is at the heart of the conceit of this film. How can Beat Takeshi, or Takeshi Kitano as the filmmaker, find success? What kind of film does he have to make in order to be a quote-unquote successful filmmaker? And so there is the conceit that is the foundation for what emerges as what seems to be a almost sketch comedy or episodic way of presenting various situations or variations on a theme as to what films he might want to try to make. Different genres that perhaps he should try to explore and experiment with outside of what he is known for, perhaps in terms of his gangster films or violent films. And so that is the basis of the conceit. And so we have a lot of sketches of various different genres that are played perhaps in tongue-in-cheek and very the basis for a lot of the visual gag and sketch comedy humor that we know Beat Takeshi is very famous for, but also explorations as to different modes of cinema. The human drama, the Ozu-esque like Japanese family drama, or dramas dealing with childhood in the 1950s, and poverty, or the what's known as the chambara, or the swords play film, or the romance film, or the or things of that nature. And sometimes it's played for laughs, or the horror film or other genre films, or science fiction films. And that conceit is played oftentimes for laughs. It's also seen as an opportunity to sort of poke fun. Beat Takeshi poking fun at himself, and also the commercial pressures of working in the cinema, perhaps, or in this world, and also what he is trying to do and his voice, while at the same time trying to entertain. And he does this all in this construction that is borrowing very much from the Getting Any type of cinema storytelling, which is the Beat Takeshi, arguably speaking, the Beat Takeshi mode of the sketch comedy that becomes very elaborate And the sketches become quite extended as we get into the film and the running time. And so this is to say that it is a sketch comedy type of film, but we are getting different forms of story, thus allowing for various characters and actors to appear in interesting, funny, quirky roles. And these are very familiar faces in the world of Takeshi Kitano's films, and it's lovely to see. And it also has that absurd, surrealist edge that is very much characteristic of Beat Takeshi's comedy. There are some wonderful moments of visual gag humor. There are some lowbrow sexual innuendo humor. That is there's some moments in particular about sexual education, which I think is just very hilarious, actually, and similar types of modes of humor, and there's a sketch comedy element to it because the absurd surrealist aspect of it means that characters can appear and disappear basically at the whim of the filmmaker, but also there are strands of story. As I say, this is a film that shows the mode of filmmaking through different genres, and it's played as an homage. It's also played as a kind of a humorous element. But we see those stories more or less continue on in their threads as the film progresses, and along the way and throughout we see Kitano and this image of Kitano and carrying this doll, and he is often associated with the K logo, which is associated with Office Kitano and his production office. And so we see this image, this metaphor of Kitano walking around with a doll that is almost a life-size doll of him. It's meant to be a sort of comic depiction of him or a Beat Takeshi. And this, I think, can have many significances and meanings. It can be, of course, a funny image in and of itself. It could also be the idea or the image of Kitano that is something separate from the actual man himself. It could also be this thing that people essentially beat up on as the butt of humor or the butt of jokes, or maybe the target of criticisms in terms of artistic critical appraisal. Or it could just be another representation in a metaphor of this multifaceted aspect of Kitano and the various dimensions to his persona. And he is, in a way, separated from himself in this visual image of Kitano carrying the doll of Kitano, much like Beat Takeshi is Takeshi Kitano, or they are the same, or maybe they're not the same, who knows. But I think that is a wonderful type of image or conceit that is consistent with the creative process in the world of filmmaking that is at the front and center of this film, Kantoku Banzai. Now, I should also say that it's not for everyone, I think, because I think it's very much closely linked with for lack of a better phrase, Japanese sensibility of physical comedy and visual gag humor, and in particular Beat Takeshi's brand of humor. And so it feels to me, and I live in Tokyo and I live in Japan, but the film, when I see it, it feels to me very much like a TV sketch comedy type of feel because of the rhythm and the way it's paced, and it goes from moment to moment to moment. Some moments, of course, are somewhat more elongated than others, I grant you that, but my point is that it does feel like this episodic type of humor show that is not somewhat similar perhaps to the type of rhythm that we might find in a sketch comedy type of program on television here in Japan. And we see a lot of personalities and actors that are very famous that emerge in almost these cameo-like roles that make for really exciting further linkages. Anyone who is very much into Japanese TV entertainment will recognize a lot of these faces, and so that's also that's a big treat for anyone who is into that aspect of Japanese entertainment. But that's also another way to say that, of course, is anyone who is watching this film and doesn't necessarily have the context of say Japanese TV or watching modern Japanese comedy shows on TV, or maybe specifically Beat Takeshi's brand of comedy and TV-based humor that is arguably outside of his role as a filmmaker. So anyone who doesn't have that context might look at this film and maybe it may or may not connect with you. Let me put it that way. And if it doesn't connect with you, then that's okay, because I think it's also a product of its culture, and specifically the Beat Takeshi brand of humor that it's found, that's made its name and presence known very, very forcefully and very successfully in modern day Japan and the world of modern day Japanese entertainment. And so if you don't necessarily have a comfort in that world, then that's okay. It may therefore mean that there might be some difficulty in connecting with this film fully. But if you look at this film as, say, maybe an introduction or a window into the type of humor that Beat Takeshi is known for, then I think you can potentially have a really good time with this. It is, I think, really funny, and it's very much a great example of the Beat Takeshi humor, while mixing in these interesting, almost meta considerations of Kitano Takeshi as the filmmaker and artist, and Office Kitano, and the role that he has to more or less fill, and how cinema has informed his life or has damaged it, whatever the case may be. But it's always done with a smile and a wink to the audience, and wanting to make you laugh and to want to entertain you. And so in that sense, I think it's very earnest and a very honest portrait that is also very funny. And I might say also that it's been one of my observations that Takeshi Kitano's films have always tried in some aspect to be focusing in on some aspect of Japanese society or culture and turning it on its head. Well, I would say that perhaps in this meta sort of way, this film itself and the fact that it exists is Takeshi Kitano's way to show his brand of comedy in a setting that is not necessarily restricted to the domestic setting of Japan, but also means that a film like Takeshi Kitano's films would be shown on international festival circuits and maybe outside of Japan, etc. And he probably knows this because of the success of many of his earlier films, especially films like Sanatin Hanabi and Zatoichi. And so he's making this film knowing perhaps that it is going to be shown outside of Japan. And in that way, it can be said in a very clever meta way to be itself a window into Takeshi's depiction of Japanese culture from a certain point of view, but also turned on its head because it's done through that wonderful style, the wonderful comedy of Beat Takeshi and the sensibilities of Beat Takeshi and his brand of comedy. So that is therefore my way of saying that I still find this film to be very much consistent with the filmography of Takeshi Kitano that we have seen thus far. Of course, there are many other direct links to other past works by Kitano, references made to, say, Zatoichi, his gangster films, Getting Any, which I mentioned earlier, the previous film Takeshi's, and the surrealist aspect of creativity as represented there. This could be said to be related to that, although also arguably maybe focusing in on a slightly different direction. Here, namely the filmmaker and comedian aspect rolled into one, and how that figures into his own identity, not just vis-a-vis the world, but perhaps even vis-a-vis himself. And while I might be speculating on that last point, still it is unavoidable that we are dealing with some kind of exploration as to the many facets, the multifaceted nature of the persona that is Takeshi Kitano or Beat Takeshi. We're getting it here a lot in this film. And we get Takeshi Kitano, the filmmaker, we get Beat Takeshi, the comedian, and we get that plane that exists in between those 2 points. And therefore, I find this film utterly fascinating, very rewatchable, very, very funny, and also key and integral in the context of the filmography of Takeshi Kitano, or Beat Takeshi. This is the film Kantoku Banzai. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I really appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.